Hey, it's Wookie from Mandala Studios, welcome to the workshop. Today we're taking you through part 2 of making a latex Grinch mask moulding. To start with, we're going to clean up and just check the sculpt from the night before, and then we're going to start cutting up some clay strips to use as the mould walls. So we just grab a block of clay and we just skim it off with a clay cutter and cut that into strips, and then we're going to go make a layer around the base of the neck all the way around to get to the bottom line for where our mould is going to work up to. We're going to reinforce that with real random bits of clay, just hold it all up in place. Often we'd do this laying down, but because of the way this sculpture's worked out, I wanted to do it standing up to get this neckline done all in one single piece. We get that neat around the edge to get a nice sharp corner, push it in with the sculpting tool or the mold making tool, then quick brush round to make it neat. Give it a quick spray with some matte wax just to ensure that nothing sticks to the surface of the form. Then we're going to make a vertical mold wall, and we're going to do this along the halfway parting line. Again, neaten up right into the corner with the sculpting tool, careful not to mark the sculpture, then go in with the brush just to make that neat. Then we're going to reinforce the back so the weight of the plaster doesn't deform the mould wall. We're just pushing that gently onto the surface of the sculpture, which we had covered in clear coat from the night before. Then we put some keys in. Note we don't put the key in the centre top, because if we're doing a 3-part mould, that's where the part is. Then we cut some more strips and put those round the edge the other direction to create a well wall. That means when we put the plaster in, the whole thing gives us a nice clean edge to work to rather than trying to brush away an angle. And we just neaten up around the eyes and anything else we've missed as we're going through this. Then on to making the plaster detail coat. So we normally buy bags of plaster, then transfer them into a big plastic bucket to make it easy to work with. Then we get some water, pour in some plaster, let it slake until it's a dry lake bed finish. Then we brush on the plaster onto a detail coat. It's not actually brushing so much as pushing the plaster in place with a soft brush. We don't want to use the brush to damage the sculpture at all. You should push that over the whole thing and try and get a nice even layer over the whole surface, making sure that we don't get any thin patches over the high spots like the nose or the eyebrows. Then we move on to the reinforcing coat, where we mix the plaster again. You can see it slaking in the corner to get to a dry lake bed finish. And once that's all saturated through, that means we're much less likely to get any lumps in the plaster mix. And we mix it up, and we'll soak some Hessian strips into the plaster and lay them over the surface of the mould. I try and put a folded edge over to the edge of the mould so we get a nice corner without too many fluffy bits exposed. Then we just take the rest of the plaster and smooth that over the whole surface to create a nice finish. Then we stand that up. Then after it's dried for a little bit but not too long, we just take the plaster wall off and neaten up the edge a bit and write the name of the mould on it. Then onto the second part, we just carefully demould the walls that we built along the vertical parting line. Just peel that back, making sure we don't damage the sculpture as we go. Then clean up any of the clay residue onto the sculpture. This should be fine because of the clear coat that I mentioned before. Then we put Vaseline over the entire mould line so that the plaster doesn't stick to itself when we put the second part on. Then we put another well wall in so we get that nice solid edge again. And once all that's in place, we add a couple of pry points to make the mould easy to come apart. Lay the whole thing down, give it a quick spray of matte wax to make sure that anything mixed with the Vaseline is all good. Then we repeat the moulding process we did for the front. We mix up some plaster, let it slake. Then we're just going to brush it over the surface. Nice and easy this time because there's very little detail to worry about getting it trapped in. If you know, I sprinkle a bit on from my fingertips as I've mixed it, then I wash my hands just to make my life more comfortable as I'm messing around with the brush. I brush that over, Again, more placing it with the brush than brushing. And we cut up some more strips of Hessian. Mix it up, and off we go. Put the second reinforcing layer on. Encase it all in the remaining plaster so we get a nice solid, relatively smooth surface. I don't like my moulds mirror smooth. I want them with a bit of texture so that holding them and moving them around I've got something to grip to. And we clean up those over bits, take off the walls, run around it with a surform just to make the nice edge to hold. Then we demold the whole thing. We just use the pry points and pop off the back, and then with a careful, I say careful in the loosest possible sense, but relatively careful levering, just make sure we don't damage the mould, but we're trying to get it off the face. This was quite a struggle, as you can see, but eventually I got it to come loose just using a screwdriver as a pry for my lever point for my pry bar, and that worked eventually. Got it out, pulled the whole thing out. There you go. Once that's all separated, we take it outside, give it a good clean with a low pressure washer. This breaks down any of the water-based clay we're using, and we just clean up any bits that are remaining in the corners we couldn't see in the dark outside. We put the two parts back together, check the mould line, it's all looking good. So what we do now is we want to seal this to make a single mould. So we tape it together nice and tight, and we mix up a little bit of plaster. And what we're going to do is patch the whole thing back together. So we're going to put in plaster into the seams on the inside and the outside, just trying to work it in, and we'll just try and match the detail as best we can. It's not too important what the detail's like in this one because the mould line is behind where the fur line is going to be on the finished mask. So we just take apart the mould tape and then just keep brushing the plaster in and around until we've got a single one-part mould again at the end. There you go. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.